And Dr. Churchill? Thank you. Again, I will remind you that it's 30 minutes that we have allotted, and how you divide that up, it is entirely up to you.
Thank you.
If you exceed 20 minutes, I will remind you, but if you choose to speak the entire 30 without questions, then that is your decision.
Can you tell me how it works? Okay. Thank you for your invitation, and I'm coming from Halifax, so I did check with the committee and make sure I had approval to be here. Dr. Dina Churchill, Innovator of Women's Health and Wellness, and I'm here because I feel like what happens in New Brunswick really will affect the rest of the country. It appears this bill is based on fear and ignorance and money more than love and wisdom. So over the next few slides, I'd like to discuss Bill 39, give you my story, the science, and the global impacts. So this is a slide put out by Vaccine Choice Canada, who hasn't employed me to be here. I'm here by myself. I should just give you that. So, you know, I've not been pushed by any billionaires, although with the $100,000 fine I have, I wouldn't mind picking up one. You know, I am not funded by any of the organizations. I'm here driving my father's 2009 Chevy Cobalt with rust on the back fender. And I'm not representing any political party, any conspiracy group. I'm here representing myself, and I'm here to share my story. I'd like to talk to you about the vaccines today in 2019, which you'll see on the right side of the screen, and the proposed bill and why it doesn't make any scientific sense. So Minister Carty had proposed the bill, and when I looked at the video on the second reading, Legislative Assembly, June 11th, reading sitting 37, he had suggested that the recent measles outbreak necessitated stricter policies to protect those who are medically fragile, to build healthier populations, to minimize disease so kids would have more time in the classroom and playground. Now, Minister Carty has made three severe assumptions in this proposal that are not only not supported by science, but in direct conflict to it. The first was measles vaccine is safer than the measles virus. The second assumption is that the measles vaccine actually prevents the outbreaks. And the third assumption was that the vaccine equates to protection of the medically fragile and improved health. So this study was done between the years 2004 and 2015, that there were 0 deaths from measles, and there were 108 deaths from the measles vaccine. So those sources, the CDC, Center of Disease Control and Prevention, on the left, and on the right of the screen, that was from the VAERS database, which is the reporting database in the United States. So the assumption that the measles vaccine is safer than the measles virus is really not supported by science. The second slide here, measles, again, this is another vaccine researcher, as she does a study over a 30-year period showing 3 measles-related deaths and 483 vaccine-related measles deaths or injury. Dr. Susanna Humphreys looks at the MMR vaccine as causing the outbreaks. So she cites international studies that actually prove measles outbreaks were caused by the vaccine strand of the measles. So not only do we not see a lot of research supporting that the outbreaks, that the vaccine is preventing outbreaks, but the vaccine actually causing the outbreaks. Now, we heard both Dr. Melanson and Dr. Nas and also Dr. Sears mentioned the California. So in 2014, there was a measles scare, 26 cases, it depends who you talk to, but there were measles scare, and what happened, it forced through mandatory vaccines. After they forced through mandation, they looked at the statistics. 86% of those that were infected with measles were up to date on their MMR. So at the very least, it looks like it's not effective. Dr. Nas just mentioned a 70% measles-related virus. I heard 38%, but that there was a significant number of those people that actually had the virus from the vaccine itself. And I heard Minister Carty say that he was going to push through the bill and then he was going to look at the legislative, the laws afterwards. I would think, given what's happened in Disney, in California, and also now in New York City, where they're being taken to court, I think it's wise to sort of figure out what the law is proposing and what's legal before we push through a bill. This was another example of the measles, the MMR vaccine causing viral mumps outbreak in the military. This was a slide from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. 1985, we were all alive in 1985. There were only those 3 vaccines that were given, DPT, polio, and MMR. And the vaccine rates were only 50 to 60%. So this 95%, I don't know what's happening with that, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr., which is appointed to the Vaccine Review Committee in the United States, and this is where this slide comes from, the children'shealthdefense.org. I highly recommend that, children'shealthdefense.org. He calls herd immunity a dishonest marketing gimmick. So you have the reference there, you can look it up yourself, and both doctors have mentioned this Quebec epidemic in 2011. Dr. Miller had given a book, I think I've given it to the court man there with the glasses, a book from Dr. Neil Miller to the New Brunswick Legislature with 400 different scientific studies, and that study in Quebec, where there were over 700 cases of the measles, is quoted in there. So it resolved naturally, there were no deaths. But herd immunity is really, it's untrue, because if the vaccine virus is actually causing the disease, it is impossible to acquire herd immunity. And this medical researcher, Neil Miller, whose book you have in front of you, writes that children who are permitted to contract measles naturally are significantly protected against various cancers in later life. This is a board-certified emergency medicine doc, Dr. Sherry Penny. She says, we've got to stop calling chickenpox and measles diseases, because they're not. They're infections. And infections come and go in a week to 10 days, leave behind a lifetime of immunity. This is a paper that was taken from Pediatrics in 2000, Journal of Pediatrics. Vaccination, quote, does not account for the impressive declines in mortality seen in the first half of the century. It was a lie. Diseases were burning themselves out in the population because we were developing a natural immunity, because we had different means of diagnosis, because of sanitation, because of better health practices. This is not my quote. This is taken from the Journal of Pediatrics. LearnTheRisk.org is another website I highly recommend. Now, this was taken from the Canadian Immunization Guide. This is an interesting slide. So it goes from 1924 to 1954, where you'll see measles are up and down. But from 1954 down to 1960, there's a steady decline in measles before the vaccine was introduced. The live vaccine was introduced in 1963. We know live viruses shed, so oftentimes what we've seen historically is when we give a live virus, we see a spike in the actual disease in the population, which might be the case. We don't know. It's blocked out, because the next year, 1964, they actually introduced the killed vaccine approved virus. So if we ignore the years that the vaccine was introduced and just look before the vaccine was introduced, the measles incidents were higher afterwards. But this is taken right from our Canadian Immunization Guide. So the bottom line, I feel, is the measles mock-up scares in California, in New York City, in Washington, in New Brunswick, are tactics to boost vaccine sales. $675 million in a quarter. This is an immunologist. Her name is Dr. Tatiana. She just published a Harvard study that shows that there's no risk to the general population in an unvaccinated person. So we can take it like this. If you believe vaccines are effective and you are vaccinated, then you shouldn't worry about the unvaccinated person. They pose no risk. Studies also show that the unvaccinated population are healthier. Dr. Tatiana's blog is there, and she writes about how vaccination compromises natural immunity. Because this is the problem here. Immunization is not vaccination. Immunization is our body's own natural response to the pathogens in the environment. Vaccination is the artificial stimulation of that process. So if you look at that chart, you'll see the measles virus somewhere in the middle on the right-hand side. If you contract the measles virus naturally, that's what you get. If you get the measles vaccine, this is all of what you get. So glyphosate, right there on the top on the left, is a toxin that's active ingredient in Roundup, water-soluble poison. Mercury and aluminum, heavy metals that are known to cause damage to the nervous system. Monkey kidney, so the vaccine is grown on animal tissue that affects DNA, retroviruses. So in Dr. Judy Merkovitz's book, The Plague, which I'd highly recommend, she talks about how 10 million chronic fatigue cases and 100,000 HIV cases actually came from the vaccine lab. Now, why do they put these adjuvants in the vaccine? Because they have to irritate our immune system, right? They have to irritate it, so it creates like a chronic inflammation. What does that chronic inflammation look like in our body? If we have chronic inflammation in our lungs, it's asthma. If we have chronic inflammation in our joints, it's going to be arthritis or juvenile arthritis. Chronic inflammation in our sinus, in our tonsils, it'll be allergies. Chronic inflammation in our gut will be ileitis, colitis, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, problems with food intolerances. Inflammation in our brain, we get autism, we get Alzheimer's disease, we have seizures. So these unintended consequences are really what we have to look at. And this is why the unvaccinated are showing healthier. Now, this is taken from the Children's Health Defense, again, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The red is the vaccinated, and the blue is the unvaccinated. So there's a three-part series, a scientific series, that shows how the unvaccinated are healthier. I would suggest that, even without a science degree, parents could look at the vaccine insert inside a vaccine product and look at the side effects. So what we see, polio vaccine increases type 1 diabetes 2.5 times more. We see the raw data, the CDC, Center of Disease Control and Prevention, showing that the MMR increases the odds of autism by 3.64 times. Then the MMR vaccine increases the risk of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis that much more, because these, again, are inflammations in the bowel. So I put a Vaxxed movie as a resource there, and the Children's Health Defense. Those would be good resources for an unbiased vaccine education. And then this is happening. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. So in the U.S., we have lots of personal injuries lawyers now that are catching on, class action suits. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just put one through to the state of New York. Who pays in Canada? In 1986, President Reagan signed a law into a bill that was passed that absolved vaccination companies of any liability, death, or disease. And then we have the U.S. Supreme Court ruling vaccines unavoidably unsafe. So is it legal to even mandate a product which is known to cause harm, especially when the vaccine companies have wiped their hands of any liability? So the U.S. courts have compensated $4 billion. I would like to know how you're going to compensate for vaccine injuries in Nova Scotia. I mean, could Minister Carty be held personally liable for injuries if he's aware of the dangers in pushing through the bill? Could the health minister, the New Brunswick government? Could the Pharmacy Association? Because in their code of ethics, their job is to give a proper education to the patient, informing them of any risks and giving them an opportunity of choice. This is my story. So my son Dominic is 21 and Gabriel is 18. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree from Memorial University in Newfoundland, and then I went to chiropractic college in Toronto in the early 90s. And chiropractic training is very similar to medical training. So we had the same professors as U of T Medical School. We get anatomies and physiologies and histologies and neuroanatomies. The difference between chiropractic and medicine is that medicine treats from an outside-in process using drugs and surgery. Chiropractic honors the body's wisdom and treats using lifestyle changes, nutrition, and chiropractic adjustments. So when I left college, I had no drug training, right? It's a drugless profession. But when I had this baby, 8 pounds and 11 ounces, and then I was encouraged to put all these needles in him to keep him healthy, it just didn't make any logical sense. I thought, if the body has the ability to heal itself, and this God has granted me this miracle, why would I stuff him up with drugs, was what was in my mind. So I start researching, and I researched everything I could, articles, books, and I went to my family doctor, and I said, can you please look at what I've researched? Because if I go by all this research, I won't be able to vaccinate my child. There's no safety studies. There's no studies that suggest that they're effective, and there's lots of side effects. She pushed the book across the desk, so I was asking her to debate it with me. I just needed to know the truth. And she said, Dina, if I admit that vaccines are dangerous, then I have to admit what I'm doing to children every day is wrong and harmful, and I can't go there. I can't go there. She didn't call me anti-vax. She didn't question my credentials. She didn't call me an irresponsible parent, and she didn't hold me down and say, your child's going to be denied an education if you don't have these vaccines. That's what medical freedom is, the ability to choose. And part of being human and our human nature is integrity, to allow for that choice. So, you move mountains when you have skin in the game. So I continued in my chiropractic practice because I had a family practice of 22 years, and I was treating many children and pediatricians, actually, who were patients and brought their kids in to see me. But I continued to look at the research. Now, you heard Dr. Melanson say that there's research on vaccines. I would ask him to show me that, because there is research and there is accountability to pharmaceuticals, but not to vaccines, because of this law that was passed in 1986 that absolves them of any liability. So this slide was taken from Adele Bigtree's program called the High Wire. Again, I put all my links on the bottom of these, so you can look them up to make sure. But you'll see there's no placebo-controlled. So a safety standard for science is a controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. What does that mean? One group gets the vaccine, one group doesn't. They don't know which group they're in. That's the gold standard. There are no safety studies for any of the vaccines that we're pumping into our little kids. So the vaccines are tested against one another, but they're not tested against a control group. So what I was seeing in my practice was that there were neurological problems happening after vaccines. So a baby that I'd done a well baby visit on, who had normal neurology, has a series of vaccines, they come back with a protruding tongue, or their body is tight, hypertonic. They could crawl before, and now they can't crawl anymore. Primitive reflexes that were disappeared are now starting to, return. So this was concerning to me, right? As a mother, as a doctor with the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, it was concerning to see this. So I couldn't debate it with my family doctor because she didn't want to, so I brought it to the next chain of command, which is the College of Physicians and Surgeons. And when I didn't get a reply there, I brought it to the health minister in Nova Scotia, Honorable Leo Glavine at the time. And when I didn't get a satisfactory response there, I brought it to the federal health minister, who is Honorable Jane Philpott, and then finally to the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, I did get a slide just in June, you'll see down there on the right-hand corner, from the Pest Control Department. So I'm inquiring about human health, and they sent me to the Pest Control Department for the studies on glyphosate. But they did reply, and they did hear my concerns. But then this happened. Former chiropractor ordered to pay $100,000 related to anti-vaccine posts. Without going into the full story, I would, if you're interested in that, my blog is healthtruth.blog. I'm writing a memoir called The Truth is Priceless. But just to clarify, I didn't lose my license. I surrendered my license, so I would have the opportunity to present to you today. And the age of autism, censorship is here because these resources are disappearing. So that's why I put them down here. The movie Vaxxed and the movie Deadly Deception by Gary Null are important. So again, for a non-biased vaccine education. Google is now a pharmaceutical company. So some of these studies that I was researching 20 years ago, I can't even find in Google right now. So that's why signing up for Vaccine Choice Canada gives you all the ingredients, for example, in a vaccine. The Children's Health Defense.org shows you the litigation that's happening globally with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. As the chair of this review committee. And ICanDecide.org, Del Beatry, again, gives you some information. So this is a website, a search engine that I like, DuckDuckGo, like the kids' game Duck, Duck, Goose, but DuckDuckGo, if you're looking for something, you can't find it on Google, try that one. So again, I'm going to repeat what some of the others have said, that, you know, there hasn't really been there hasn't been any studies of what 70 doses, so 70 doses is over here, what our kids are being mandated to have right now, 70 doses will do to our children. And I think that slide is actually incorrect. There's 66 doses after birth, but there's 4 that are mandated while the baby is in utero. Now, 21 years ago, some other ladies here might be around my age, but we weren't allowed to take an aspirin when we were pregnant, right? Because we'd understood that blood-brain barrier. We'd seen the effects of thalidomide. It was still fresh. So pregnant women weren't allowed to take these chemicals in. Now they're mandating 4 of these are done to our pregnant mothers and babies before the baby's even born, and there's no science. In 2009, when the H1N1 vaccine was introduced, the fetal mortality rate, spontaneous abortion, increased by 4,000%. That's why it didn't come back for the second year. So the bottom line is, your children are the lab rats for this experiment. Now, this is a slide taken from Autism Speaks. So starting on the left, in 1975, there were 1 in 5,000 had autism. Going right to the right side of the screen, in 2009, there were 1 in every 110. Right now, 1 in every 36 kids have autism. 1 in every 6 have some sort of learning disability. Dr. Stephanie Snoff, whose research you'll see on the bottom of the page, is an MIT researcher who's been charting this increase. And she claims that the glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup and also the chemical in vaccines, 5 minutes?
10.
Okay. Is really responsible for the rise. And she says, if we don't change this picture, this chemical load, because it's not like one shot's going to give you autism. It's accumulation of babies pick up what their moms had. And then each generation gets more toxic as we go along. Dr. William Thompson, he was a CDC senior researcher who was a whistleblower who talked about the cover-up that happened around autism and the MMR vaccine. You can watch that on the movie Vaxxed. But his quote was, "Oh my God, I can't believe what we did." Again, all these slides are referenced with Miller's book, which I'll show you in a second. Highly educated parents are far more likely not to vaccinate. So I was a little disappointed with Minister Carty's presentation that he felt like education didn't work. It was kind of contradictory coming from the education minister. I think when parents are given proper information, they make the best choices for their family. So the fact that the highly educated parents are far more likely should be a statement to inquire further instead of punishing this and trying to snuff out the anti-vaxxers. Now, I grew up in Newfoundland, and I'm living in Nova Scotia. Both these provinces have recently vetoed mandatory vaccines. So you guys are experimenting for the rest of Canada. This is the book. So this is Miller's book that he graciously donated to the New Brunswick Legislature, and I'm just going to read the inscription that he put on the inside. I hope that my book can help you understand while mandating vaccines is a poor idea that mainly benefits our industry. It will do little to improve the overall health of our community, and it may eventually or actually increase the rates of chronic disease. So contrary to Minister Carty's proposal that it's going to make the population healthier, here we have a scientist that studied over 400 scientific papers and says that that is incorrect. So just to summarize, there's more deaths from vaccine than the actual measles virus. And we've seen that picture, right, where the measles vaccine is just a little part. The vaccine, the natural measles virus, the vaccine also has all those other adjuvants, all those heavy metals and toxins. The natural measles has a protective effect against certain cancers. It strengthens your immune system. Vaccines don't prevent outbreaks. We don't have suggestions of that. In fact, we see that some of the vaccines, like the MMR, is causing outbreaks, because when we trace back the disease, it's coming from a vaccine strand of the virus. Herd immunity is a false construct, because if you have the vaccine causing the disease, even if you have 95% people vaccinated, there's still going to be an incidence. The unvaccinated pose no risk. This is Tatiana, specialist, immunologist, scientist. Unvaccinated are healthier, and the Children's Health Defense with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has a 3-part series on that, with the best scientists in the world showing why this is. So again, Minister Carty's idea of a healthier population is incorrect. There's no gold standard safety studies for or efficacy. So again, Dr. Serge had pointed out that, in pharmaceuticals, they have this protection. If some medicine is causing heart attacks, they take it off the market. Vaccines have that protection liability that doesn't show up anywhere else in business. So the very company that are supplying chemicals that we're vaccinating our children are not held liable. That should be scary. So, 5 minutes? Okay. Is it legal to mandate unavoidably unsafe? I'm at my thank you, so I'm almost finished. So I just want to thank you for your time and attention to these urgent matters of informed consent and medical freedom to choose what's best for our children. If I were to put that cocktail of chemicals into my child, I'd likely be charged. So given the new science that shows these unattended effects or side effects to these chemicals, I think we really must do our due diligence in proving them 100% safe before we consider mandating this procedure. Even Dr. Serge Melanson from the Medical Society says, I can't guarantee they're safe. Well, if you can't guarantee they're safe, then we shouldn't be mandating them. I'm grateful you're taking the time to listen to the presentations and really to do the research, because the health of our Canadian children rests upon your attention to constitutional laws and your curiosity to the unbiased vaccine education. I beg you to carefully consider the full ramifications of this Bill 39 and the unintended consequences. If you have a shadow of a doubt, just a shadow of a doubt of the health and safety of these 70 2019 mandatory procedures, stop Bill 39. Stop Bill 39, at least until you've had time to review the research and check the legalities. This bill violates the Nuremberg Code that was put in place to ensure our human rights and ethical medical conduct. What happens here in New Brunswick sets a precedence for the rest of our country and the rest of the world. It takes courage. It takes courage to face a century-old lie and turn the ship around, but Atlantic Canadians have always been loved and respected on a world stage for our integrity. I would ask that you live up to it together. Thank you.
For questions, I suggest one, rapid fire.
Ma question en français, donc je ne sais pas si vous voulez mettre votre... Okay. Oui, merci beaucoup. Évidemment, le comité a décidé d'avoir des consultations publiques pour justement avoir l'opinion des experts et du public. On va être bombardé un peu d'informations pour les prochains 3 jours. Et suite à ça, nous autres, on va devoir faire ou prendre une décision. J'ose croire que nous allons prendre une décision fondée sur des preuves. Et... alors, si les organismes médicaux reconnus, les associations médicales, le Centre de contrôle des maladies disent toutes que les vaccins préviennent les maladies et les maladies infectieuses, pourquoi ce comité devrait-il vous prendre au mot sur le sujet des vaccins? C'est ma seule question.
Yeah, I would say please don't believe me, that the onus is on us to prove it to ourselves that vaccines are safe and effective. I think the one thing, thank you, that's a great question. I think the one thing that we all agree on, even Minister Carty, is that vaccines aren't 100% safe. So until we prove that with the science, I think we can't mandate a procedure like that. Bienvenue.
Question? Mr. Savoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Churchill, you mentioned during your comments that we would be at the vanguard of mandating vaccine. You are aware that Ontario has mandatory vaccines. I believe Quebec does as well.
I don't believe they do. I think you're the only province. They have mandate. That's another thing, the proof. That's a great question, actually. Thank you. The proof of vaccination, I think, is a good idea, because then you can see where the diseases are coming from, if it's coming from the vaccinated or the unvaccinated population. But I don't think anyone mandates the actual needle, unless you can show me that proof. From my knowledge, I don't think. I think you're the only province right now.
Okay, so are you aware of any charter challenges or Supreme Court challenges to Ontario's laws?
No, but in the New York State is being taken to court right now, a lawsuit with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because it's the mandated policies in education.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically here, Bill 39 is our responsibility. So I want to make sure that we have enough comparable information to be able to make sure that as a committee we're delivering the right information back to the Legislative Assembly. So ultimately, when I listened to your comments and a lot of the things that you said, what I would have preferred to hear is more on how Bill 39 I would have liked to have heard more on Bill 39 rather than your position on whether vaccines are safe.
Okay, if I might just comment on that. I think you mentioned about homeschooling. So it's again, I'm not politically inclined, so you have to correct me, but I think education and vaccines are paid for by our taxes, right? So if somebody's choosing not to vaccinate and not to partake in the public school system, I would then challenge you to see if there's some sort of a rebate on their taxes, because vaccines aren't free. Dr. Noss mentioned that. Vaccines aren't free in Canada. We pay for them via our taxes. Is that right?
Well, you know what? Even if you don't put garbage out on a particular week, you still pay for garbage service. So,
that's right.
You know, that argument doesn't hold water for me.
But I'm just thinking,
because you don't use a service all the time.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. But if there's a significant amount of the population, I mean, if you mandate those procedures, I would just challenge you to look at what cost that's going to be to the government. So, I mean, that would be another comment I'd make about the bill. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation today, and thank you for attending. You're going to leave some documents with us. Thank you.